Story 1, The Man by the Route 66 Sign. I've hauled this Amarillo lane so many times I could drive it in my sleep. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. US 287 at 3 in the morning feels like another planet. Just asphalt, darkness, fence lines fading into the void, the silhouette of a windmill watching you pass, and not much else. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. That night in March 2018 was just another night behind the wheel. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. Coffee in the thermos, cruise set just under 65. Nothing out of place. The first odd thing was how empty it all felt. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. So empty I started counting reflectors just to fight the monotony. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. And then I glimpsed her. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. She, around 35, was on the shoulder waving both arms, stepping into the edge of my lane. Hair plastered to her expression from the wind. Even through the glare of my own headlights, I could see her mouth moving. Something was following between the lines of headlights. I eased off the throttle and thumbed the CB mic. Something was following between the lines of headlights. Any DPS on 287 near mile 104. Female pedestrian flagging traffic. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. Static. Nothing. As I rolled closer, she bolted to the passenger side of my rig, slapping the door and shouting something I couldn't hear over the hiss of my brakes. She, around 28, was young, maybe late 20s, no coat, no bag. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. Her fists banged against the step rail. I cracked the window an inch. Something was following between the lines of headlights. Please, he's coming back. He, around 32, is going to get me again. Let me in, please. I didn't think. I threw the lock and pulled the door handle. She, around 44, scrambled up the steps and into the seat like she'd been chased for miles. Something was following between the lines of headlights. She, around 28, was trembling hard, staring out the windshield instead of at me. I reached for the CB again, but caught a movement in the mirror. Something was following between the lines of headlights. A pickup, headlights off, grille glinting just enough to make it visible. It was closing fast. She, around 32, glimpsed it too and started screaming, clutching the dash. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. Go, go. Don't let him block us. I jammed the freight rig into gear and rolled. The trailer creaked, air brakes releasing in a rush. The pickup kept coming, then swung wide and cut in front of us with its lights still off. Stay down. I barked, gripping the wheel. I flashed my hazards once and leaned on the air horn. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. The pickup drifted across my lane like it wanted me to brake. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. I didn't. I let the rig build speed on the downgrade. Something was following between the lines of headlights. Engine howling, trailer rattling. The pickup swerved again, but I held my line. At the last second, it veered off to the shoulder, then fell back. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. We didn't speak for a full minute, just watched the mirrors. Finally, the headlights snapped on and the freight rig dropped out of view like it had decided to wait for someone else. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. I took the next lit exit at speed, tires barking as we hit the ramp. Pulled into a 24-hour station, nose out, high beams on. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. Grabbed my phone, 2 bars now, and called 911. US 287 near mile 10 something, I told the dispatcher. Female pedestrian flagged me down saying someone was after her. Pickup tried to cut us off. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. It's sitting out there somewhere. She, around 32, murmured units were far on the way. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. Stay in your vehicle. If he approaches, do not engage. The silhouette was still shaking. She, around 40, kept looking nervously at the frontage lonely Route 66, flinching every pair of headlights that passed. I handed her my water bottle, and after a few sips, words tumbled out. He, around 44, picked me up outside Amarillo, murmured he'd give me a ride to Oklahoma City, but when I wondered aloud to be dropped off at a station, he locked the doors. He, around 44, she stopped, staring out the windshield like she couldn't finish. I jumped out when he slowed on the shoulder. Thought I'd lost him, but he turned around. I told her we were safe now, that highway patrol officer were on the way, but she kept clutching the dash like she was ready to spring again. I kept the freight rig idling, nose out, headlights on high beams. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. 15 minutes later, red and blues finally flickered across the lot. A county cruiser pulled in, followed by another. Something was following between the lines of headlights. I stepped down slow, hands visible, told them what happened. They took her statement first. One deputy crouched by the passenger step with a notebook ready. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. She, around 44, repeated the same story. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. Hitchhiked. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. Figure wouldn't let her out. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. Chased her when she ran. Another unit cruised the frontage lonely Route 66. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. The pickup was gone. Could have peeled off on a ranch cut. One officer murmured miles of dirt roads of Nevada out here. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. Once they're shadowed, they vanish. They offered to take her to a shelter in Amarillo. She, around 32, agreed quickly, desperate to get inside their vehicle. Before she left, she peered at me once, almost guilty, and whispered, "Thank you for stopping." I gave a nod, not sure what to say. When the lot was quiet again, I did a walk around with my flashlight. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. Trailer straps intact, tires fine, just that smear of dust on the grab handle where she'd clawed her way up. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. I didn't park in Amarillo that night. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. I drove 2 more hours and pulled into a crowded freight rig plaza. Curtains cracked an inch, keys in my hand, lights close by. Habit I haven't broken since. A week later, a trooper called. "We filed it," he murmured. No pickup matched, no arrests. That was it. Quiet night, he called it. But I still hear her murmur when I think of that stretch of Route 66. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. The way she murmured, "He's going to get me again." And every time I see someone on the shoulder now, figure, silhouette, doesn't matter. I call first, keep rolling, and never ever stop in the shadowed. They don't call Route 6650, the loneliest lonely Route 66, in America as a joke. Nevada's stretch feels like it runs across the bones of the earth. 2 lanes pinned to emptiness. Sagebrush stretching forever, mountains flat against the horizon. I was running it in July 2016. ELE to Fallon. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. Standard overnight haul. Dry goods, light load, nothing exciting. My ELD was tight, but I figured I'd catnap at the next turnout. The night had that strange desert quiet. The moon was bright enough to turn the sage into black and white shadows, mesas like cardboard cutouts in the distance, radio motionless quiet. I remember thinking, good night for an easy run. And that's when I noticed the shape up ahead. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. From a mile out, it peered like a block across my lane. Shadowed. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. Wrong. As I closed in, it resolved into a sedan parked sideways. No flashers, no hood up. Trucker's door just barely cracked. I eased off the throttle, touched the jake, then killed it. No need to announce myself, more than 40 tons already did. I feathered the brakes and swept the roadside with my vacant gaze. Something moved in the sage. Low, quick, like heads ducking. Then another shape, opposite side. That was the moment my blood went cold. Something. The Route 66 fell silent again, as if nothing had ever happened. Story 2, the woman on Route 16. Was following between the lines of headlights. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a trap. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. Truckers have an unspoken list of rules. One is don't put yourself nose with a problem someone else arranged. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. Not on an empty Route 66 with no cell bars and no witnesses. You don't step out unless you know what you're stepping into. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. I had seconds to decide. Shoulder too steep. Stop and back. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. Recipe for jackknifing into a ditch. Only move left. Go through. I dropped a gear, centered up, and laid on the air horn. A long screaming blast. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. My bumper met the side of the sedan square. The vehicle jerked. Tires screaming as it slid sideways. Gravel pinged my undercarriage. Out of the sage, two figures shot out, scattering back instead of forward. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. That told me what I needed. They weren't desperate, just opportunistic. The sedan rolled just enough to open me a sliver. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. Trailer shimmied, but held. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. I kept my hands firm, didn't swerve. I just kept going forward. When the rear trailer cleared, I finally breathed. Lonely Route 66 stretched open again. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. Desert silent as if nothing had happened. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. I checked the mirror. Sedan sat crooked in the shadowed. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. No lights came on. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. Nothing followed. I kept it at 55, vacant gaze glued to every turnout like they were open mouths waiting to swallow me. The nap I planned was gone. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. I drove on past legal hours until the horizon turned blue. The freight rig stop outside Fallon peered like heaven. Fluorescent buzzing, other rigs lined up like guardians. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. I parked nose out, killed the engine, and my hands just stayed clamped to the wheel. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. When I finally did my walk around, found a scrape of paint, not mine, streaked low across the bumper. Inside, I wondered aloud for a landline and called Route 66 Patrol. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. Gave them the mile marker and facts. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. Sedan sideways across lane. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. Made contact. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. Glimpsed individuals in brush. Trooper murmured I wasn't the first to report stage blocks out there. Could be thieves, could be worse, he murmured. Just a report logged and another warning for the file. I tried to sleep, but every sound in the lot felt like a footstep. Something was following between the lines of headlights. When I finally rolled on, the desert peered normal again. That's the part that gets you. How quickly it goes back to looking empty, innocent, harmless. Even now, when I think back, I don't picture the vehicle as much as the movement in the sage. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. Human silhouettes ducking down like coyotes hiding from headlights. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. That's what still crawls under my skin. These days, I don't nap on Route 6650. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. I stick to lit freight rig stops, even if it means pushing extra miles. If I see a vehicle sideways across a lonely Route 66 again, I already know my plan. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. Horn and geometry, nothing else. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. Because that night, I learned something simple and ugly. Some people count on you being better than they are. They expect you to stop. And out there in the shadowed, being decent is the door they're trying to pry open. I was in my second year of trucking, 25 at the time, and still learning which instincts I could trust. Tulsa, August 2019. I had timed my fuel stop carefully, slipping into that quiet window between the dinner rush and the 2 a.m. bar crowd. Normally, that's when stations are calmest. Swipe card, set nozzle, glove up, restroom, grab an energy drink, back out. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. Same order every time. Because the less you think, the quicker you notice when something isn't right. Something was following between the lines of headlights. That night, I parked by the pumps close enough to the door to cut down my walk. A couple of rigs were parked across the lot, engines droning like background music. I swiped my card, clipped the nozzle, and leaned against the side of my freight rig, stretching my back. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. Then I caught the faint sound of a whisper, so faint I thought at first it was the hiss of the pumps. "Don't leave me." I turned. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. A girl was standing at the edge of the pump island. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. 17 maybe. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. No coat, no bag, just shorts and a t-shirt, shoes without socks. Her hair was tied back carelessly like she had left in a rush. She didn't stumble or slur like someone drunk. She peered clear-eyed but terrified. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. "You okay?" I wondered aloud. She peered toward a silver sedan parked near the store. Two men leaned against it. They weren't looking at her. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. They were staring at me. The girl's shoulders hunched as if she was trying to shrink. "Don't leave me," she whispered again. "Come inside with me," I murmured quickly. "We'll talk to the clerk." Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. She hesitated. Her feet shifted like she wanted to move, but was waiting for permission. The men by the sedan stayed motionless. And that was what made my stomach tighten. They didn't call her back, didn't scold her for talking to me. They just watched like I was the variable they were measuring. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. I stepped sideways, keeping my vacant gaze on them, and freed the nozzle. The pump beeped, but I left it running. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. Together. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. I murmured to her again, "Mr. Murmur." This time, she followed me inside. The clerk peered up from his counter. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. "Call the highway patrol officer," I murmured, whispering. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. His vacant gaze darted to the girl, then back to me. Without hesitation, he reached for the phone beneath the counter. "What's the emergency?" he wondered aloud. "Possible abduction," I murmured. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. Two men outside. Silver sedan. He repeated the words into the receiver, then added, "Need a unit now." I turned to make sure the girl was with me, but she wasn't. "Miss," I called as I checked the aisles. No bathroom door swinging, no freezer open. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. She was just gone. The clerk swore under his breath, still on the line with dispatch. She came in with a trucker. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. Now she's gone. 2 males outside by a sedan, no plate visible. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. She had vanished as suddenly as she appeared. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. The men outside hadn't moved toward the store. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. They leaned against the sedan, still watching. Not the girl, me. Don't go out there, the clerk murmured quickly. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. Wait for the cops. They're close. We stood side by side using the store windows as mirrors, careful not to press too close. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. 90 seconds crawled by. Then. Story 3, the CB transmission. Red and blue lights swept across the lot. The sedan rolled away like nothing had happened. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. The officers listened to my account, then replayed the security footage. The girl's figure appeared on screen, small and blurred. The men were just shadows by the sedan. No plate could be read. No missing person report matched her description. You did the right thing, the older officer told me. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. Bring people inside. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. Keep them in camera view. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. Involve staff. Don't isolate. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. I nodded, but my mind was stuck on her whisper. Don't leave me. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. I moved my rig closer to other drivers. I didn't leave right away. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. I sat with the engine idling, replaying every detail. Should I have grabbed her arm? Should I have dragged her further inside? Or was that exactly what those men wanted to make me step out into the lot alone? I kept checking news sites afterward, waiting to see if a missing girl was reported. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. Nothing ever came up. Maybe she was bait. Maybe she was genuinely begging for help. Maybe she was both. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. I'll never know. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. Since that night, I radio for another trucker when I stop after midnight. I ask clerks to watch me go in and out. Something was following between the lines of headlights. Simple things, but they matter. Because the scariest part isn't always what does happen. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. Sometimes it's what almost does or what you never get answers for. That night in Tulsa taught me that. I've been on the lonely Route 66 most of my life. I started trucking in my 20s when I was still full of that restless energy and thought driving across the country sounded more like an adventure than a job. Something was following between the lines of headlights. By the time of this story, I was 44, a widower, and trucking wasn't an adventure anymore. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. It was survival. Something was following between the lines of headlights. The kind of survival where you get your loads, you keep your wheels moving, and you learn to live with the silence of your own cab. This happened in May of 2014 on a route I'd taken more times than I could count, moving freight across Arizona. I just finished a long haul eastbound and was motionless tired. The kind of tired where even strong coffee feels like water. Near Flagstaff, there's this rest area I'd pulled into a few times before. Nothing special. 2 bathrooms that smelled of bleach and old urine. A couple vending machines with stale chips and sodas, and a parking lot half-lit by buzzing lamps that always seemed to flicker out when you needed them most. Still, it was a place to stop, set the brakes, and catch a few hours in the sleeper. That night, it was nearly empty, just me and one old SUV parked crooked at the far end. That was exactly how I liked it. Empty meant quiet. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. Quiet meant maybe a chance at real sleep. I parked nose out like I always did because if something felt wrong, I wanted nothing between me and the ramp except the turn of a key. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. I set my alarm for 3 hours, drew the sleeper curtains, and stretched out on the bunk. I thought I'd be out cold in minutes, but sleep doesn't always come easy when you've been alone too long. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. I stared up at the ceiling of the cab for a while, listening to the distant whoosh of cars on the interstate. Every so often, a semi roared past, and the ground vibrated just enough to remind me I wasn't totally alone. I remember thinking about my wife then. She'd been gone almost 5 years by that point. Something was following between the lines of headlights. But nights like this, quiet, tired, my guard down, I felt her absence more than ever. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. She used to call me just before bed, ask if I'd eaten. I would have given anything for that kind of check-in that night. At some point, though, I drifted off. It couldn't have been more than a couple hours later when I woke to the sound of tires on gravel. You learn to notice little noises when you live on the lonely Route 66. A vehicle door shutting 2 spots away can wake you faster than an alarm. This one was different. The engine was low, almost humming, and I realized it had pulled in without headlights. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. That was enough to pull me fully awake. Through the curtain, I glimpsed a van. It had slid into the space right next to me. Now, anyone who drives a freight rig knows there's unwritten etiquette in rest areas. You don't crowd another trucker when the place is empty. You just don't. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. That's what raised the first red flag. There had to be a dozen other spots, but this van parked tight against my passenger side, almost too close. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. That wasn't coincidence. I pulled my curtain back an inch and peered. The side door of the van was lined up with my steps. The ones right below my cab door. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. No movement yet, no noise, just a shadowed rectangle with no plates I could see. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. Something about it prickled the back of my mind. I told myself maybe it was someone catching sleep like me. Still, I slid my boots on just in case and rested my hand near the air horn lanyard above my seat. It was around 2:40 a.m. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. When I caught the faint sound of a faint metallic tap like something brushed my steps. Then whispers, 2 voices low, trying not to carry. I leaned forward just enough to peer out. Then I glimpsed them, 2 shapes crouched near the grab handle. They were right there, inches from my cab, as if waiting for me to come down. I can't describe the kind of fear that washed over me in that moment. Not panic. Not the kind that makes you run. It was cold, deliberate fear. The kind that narrows your vision and makes every thought laser sharp. They weren't here by accident. They weren't travelers. They were hunting. Without thinking too much, I slammed the air horn. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. The blast shook the whole cab, rattled my mirrors, and echoed across the lot like a shotgun. I expected them to scatter. Anyone would have, but they didn't. They flinched, sure, but then they moved toward me, toward my trucker's side window. One of them cooped his hands around his mouth and started yelling, "Get out of the freight rig." The other one pounded the side of my door hard enough that the whole cab vibrated. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. Whatever they wanted, it wasn't help. I could see their faces now. Intent was all I needed to see, and their intent was clear. I didn't wait another second. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. I fired the ignition. My foot hit the clutch, hand on the stick, and I swung the wheel hard. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. The freight rig lurched forward, and I gunned it toward the ramp. My trailer rattled, load groaning against the straps, but I didn't care. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. I just needed distance. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. The van reversed fast, but I was already halfway to the exit. I hit the horn again, long and punishing, and kept my vacant gaze locked on the lonely Route 66. Every muscle in my form was wound tight, waiting for a gunshot or the slam of metal into my rear. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. But it never came. By the time I hit the merge, my rig was thundering at 60 and the rest area lights were fading in the mirror. I didn't. The Route 66 fell silent again, as if nothing had ever happened. Story 4, The Truck That Followed. Stop, couldn't. I called 911 on Bluetooth as I merged, murmur shaking even though I tried to keep it level. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. The dispatcher listened, wondered aloud for my location, and told me to keep moving until I reached a well-lit freight rig stop. There wasn't a unit nearby, she murmured. Just keep going. Easy for her to say. My hands were locked on the wheel, vacant gaze flicking between the mirrors and the black stretch of Route 66 ahead. Every pair of headlights in the distance made my stomach clench. I couldn't shake the image of those two crouched figures at my step. I drove 70 miles before I finally pulled into a busy freight rig plaza. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. Lights bright as daylight and cameras on every pump. Only then did I kill the engine and sit back, shaking so hard I couldn't unclench my jaw. The highway patrol officer showed up about 40 minutes later. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. They told me I did the right thing by leaving fast and loud. That didn't make me feel better. It just made me wonder how many other drivers had stopped. How many hadn't been so lucky. After that night, I changed the way I run. I don't sleep in isolated rest areas anymore. Not if I can help it. Only 24-hour freight rig plazas with cameras, attendants, and other rigs parked close by. Sometimes I even nap with the engine idling just to feel like I can move at a second's notice. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. I never glimpsed their vacant gaze clearly, but I'll never forget the way they peered at me. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. Like I was already theirs if I just opened that door. That's the thing about trucking people don't get. The cab feels like a fortress when you're inside it, but it's not. All it takes is one wrong decision, one moment of trust, and that fortress becomes a trap. I learned that the hard way in a near-empty rest area outside Route 66, Arizona, and I don't think I'll ever sleep easy on the lonely Route 66 again. I've been behind the wheel most of my adult life. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. 30 years in, I can tell you that interstate rest areas past midnight all share the same personality. Not peaceful, not lively, just hollow. If you're lucky, the noise stays just bugs, bulbs, and wind. If you're unlucky, you hear something else. This was I-64 outside Louisville, June 2015. I was tired, already regretting the gas station burrito sitting in my gut. I'd lost the fight with my eyelids 5 exits back. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. So, I pulled into the rest stop. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. The plan was simple. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. 45 minutes, alarm set, then roll again. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. Just enough to straighten my log-book line and keep from ending up in the median. The place wasn't empty, but close. A state plow freight rig sat under the far light. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. A crooked sedan by the vending machines. A family-style minivan that had seen better years. Restrooms lit, info center shadowed. I picked my spot, shut down the rig, and did my ritual scan. Mirrors, angles, blind corners, footpaths. Old habits. Nobody moving, just bugs orbiting poles. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. I half closed my privacy curtain, leaving a gap to watch the entrance. Stretched on the bunk, the Route 66's whoosh filtered through. Hiss of tires, thumps on dotted seams. I was out in under a minute. The alarm ripped me back after 40 minutes. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. My mouth felt like cotton. I was reaching for the ignition when something clicked in my head. Sound faint but human. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. A muffled strain. I sat still. A second noise followed. The kind of squeak a dome light switch makes, though I couldn't see it. Then came the muffled sound again. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. Shorter this time, like a word stuffed into cloth. Through the curtain gap, I glimpsed the sedan 2 spots down. Its interior light blinked once and went shadowed. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. The blink you get from a door opened, then shut quick. Nothing else moved. My first instinct, hit the air horn, announce myself. Second instinct, dial 911 and let a trooper sort it. Third, step down and knock on the window like the decent figure my old figure raised. Instead, I hesitated. I told myself it could be an argument. It could be nothing. But the sound came again. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. Higher now. Panicked, unmistakably human. My hand went for the horn cord, then froze. I wanted more certainty before I acted. I decided on a plan. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. Start the engine. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. Swing the rig across the lot, block the sedan from leaving, then hammer the horn. No heroics, just light and steel. But before I moved, the sedan's tail lights flared red, then cut. The vehicle straightened, glided forward without headlights, hugging shadow until the last second. Then the beam snapped on, and it was gone. Up the ramp, swallowed by the interstate. I pulled out and followed at a distance, not to catch them. I knew I couldn't, just to move, because sitting in that silence felt worse. But there were 2 exits, and by the time I picked one, every vehicle was just anonymous tail lights. The silence on the road felt heavier than the night itself. I stopped at a 24-hour freight rig stop bathed in harsh light. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. Called 911, told the dispatcher exactly what I'd seen. Something was following between the lines of headlights. Vehicle, interior light, muffled screams. She wondered aloud for make, model, plate. I had little to give. Every mile marker felt closer than it should have been. She murmured they'd send a unit. Wondered aloud if I wanted a call back. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. I murmured yes, though I dreaded the ring. Something was following between the lines of headlights. Hours later, a young officer called back. They checked the rest stop, the bathrooms, shoulders for 10 miles. Nothing unusual. No vehicle matched my description, no bodies, no arrests. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. He gave me a case number, the bureaucratic version of a shrug. For weeks, I kept asking myself, was that crybait or a victim? Did I escape a trap or leave someone behind? The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. If you want the neat answer, I don't have it. The Route 66 stretched too far to be real. There was no news article, no missing person flyer, no plate number to circle in a notebook. Just a crooked vehicle, a flicker of light, a smothered sound, and my own hesitation. That's what stuck. Not what I did, but what I didn't. People ask if I'm haunted. Haunted means something chases you. This doesn't. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. It just sits like a mile marker I pass in my head every so often. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. A reminder of how thin the line is between doing nothing and doing something and how fast it disappears when the moment's gone. The quiet of rest areas after midnight isn't peace. It's a question. That night, I answered too late. I've been trying to answer earlier ever since. The CB radio hissed like it was breathing. If you also thought the scariest part wasn't the freight rig stop, but realizing no one was coming to help, you're starting to get it. Smash that like button, subscribe so you don't miss the next scare, and tell me, would you have stopped for that silhouette on the shoulder? Okay, trucker nightmares are bad enough, but at least you've got wheels to escape. Imagine being locked inside 4 walls with nowhere to run. Click now to watch 4 disturbing Airbnb horror stories, because sometimes the real danger is waiting inside the place you paid to sleep. Thanks for watching. Stay alert. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare. Wind carried whispers through the open vents. The Route 66 fell silent again, as if nothing had ever happened. Really scary stories, every day. Subscribe, like if you like, turn on the bell so you don't miss new videos.